All right, good evening. I'm Charlie Baker, the Executive Director of the Chin County Regional Planning Commission, and we're gonna have a bit of a little training session on CCRPC. Here in this next 45 minutes or so. Hopefully, it shouldn't take that long. I got about 20 slides or so, hopefully there's time for any questions or discussion. So if you do have any questions, sorry. You're the newest face, so I'm looking for you. If you have any questions, feel free to interrupt.
Oh, good. CCRPC, what it was.
Yeah. Start at the beginning. Please. Share. Shared.
Yeah, if you and I can't pass it, you can get it from.
Okay. And Faith, can you see that okay online? You can,
Yes, I
okay.
can.
Is it in presentation mode or in edit mode?
It's in presentation mode.
It is in presentation mode?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure, look at the screen, see.
Okay.
We have a minute for. Will this presentation be discoverable online or?
Yeah, the presentation will be linked to this meeting, and also there's the resource page for the board members where you can find all the old training presentations and things, as well as, you know, legislative breakfasts and other resources for board members.
And I didn't see Peter there.
Yeah, this is here's kind of arrange this into like 5 sections, just some background, including getting into the regional plans and then how we implement the plans or follow up on the plans through our work program and our budget. And then also how do things get, you know, the things that we plan with our communities, how do they get implemented? And that's, you know, state, regional, and municipal level. And then a little bit about how are we organized in order to do all our work and carry forth the plan. And then just a final couple of little slides on just other resources for you. Just core values that we developed a couple of years ago: integrity, accountability, respect, inclusion. The purpose is really to assist and serve our members and what they're doing more locally, and also address regional issues. And a focus on planning, of course. And we did also adopt an equity commitment a year and a half ago or so, or I guess a year ago. It feels longer than that. And just real basically, regional planning commissions were set up to provide support and technical assistance to towns in the state. We've been in state law since 1968. Chin County RPC was actually formed in 1966. And by our towns, we were the second RPC formed after Wyndham. So, you know, the state started down there, so they had to start RPCs too. And the main topics that we work on: land use, transportation, housing, emergency management, environmental protection, energy, climate, economic development. We'll probably come back to those. And then we're also federally required MPO. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's a link here that bring into our bylaws. So there's a little more detail on kind of authorizing statute, the purpose, the committees. So a lot of that organizational structure is outlined in the bylaws. Questions so far? Okay, here's those topic areas again. And I think we use this graphic when we've been talking to legislators. These topics that we're typically involved in. And here's kind of some more specific duties for regional planning commissions in state law. Talking about mutual cooperation, you know, within our regions and outside our regions. Advice and assistance to municipalities. The regional plan is a requirement for RPCs. And just so you know, that's a distinction in statute. Regional planning commissions are required to do plans. Municipalities, it's an option. You can do a plan or not as a municipality. All of our towns do. So Chittenden County's kind of opted into the planning framework.
Don't you have to have municipal planning to do some of it?
Yeah. You do, right, and so, but I think there's at least 50 towns in the state that don't have zoning. So, there's this, duty about reviewing capital expenditures, about consistency with the regional plan, appearing before the district environmental commissions and the public service board in Act 250, section 248 applications. And then there's this approving municipal plans and confirming their planning process, as well as determinations of energy compliance. There's more language there in statute, but this was a little bit of summary. Any questions on these? Thanks, Garrett, for asking that. And then the MPO is under federal law. It's federally required. But it's the local governments, and actually the governor has a role too in kind of setting up the MPO. And it's transportation planning and policy work. It's required in places that have urbanized populations of more than 50,000. Anybody want to guess about how much our urbanized population is? 120. Sorry, except for Jeff.
What have been mine?
That was your guess too, okay, yeah, we're 120,000, so we're a good ways past this 50,000. It does come up, are there other parts of the state that are getting close, and I think the closest area is White River Junction area, and they're only at about mid-20s in terms of the urbanized population.
And that's in 2 states, right?
Yeah, that's across state urban area, but they're quite a ways from qualifying for the NPO. So just one fundamental thing is, I think we may be the only state where there's only one NPO. And so, because there's a small state minimum of that funding, we probably, and I hesitate to say this in some forms, but we probably get more money per capita than just about any NPO in the country.
I don't say that stuff when it's recorded.
It's recorded, but it's also, I think, pretty factual. And it's really, the federal law talks about this comprehensive, cooperative, continuing planning process. And there's a lot more requirements in the federal law. Elaine will get more detailed on the MPO duties at a subsequent training. And, our biggest funding source is the federal transportation planning funds. And just a little more history here. I had more hair back then. But here's Garrett, here's Andy from, we went through the merger in 2011. So just occasionally you'll hear references to like back when we were separate or CCMPO specific things. The MPO was established in '83 for the urbanized area. They expanded in '97 to serve the 18 incorporated towns. Sorry, Garrett.
18 of 19, not all of 18, yes. Just want to make that clear.
Noted, and then in 2011, we had, gone through a process, and, became more of the organization we are today. Questions on that? And then, kind of the guiding document in terms of direction that we work on is set up in these big planning documents. So there's a regional plan that's required for state law, focuses on kind of land use and development, and also resource protection. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan is a requirement in the federal law over the MPO work. We've also voluntarily done a comprehensive economic development strategy with the economic development and other partners in adjacent regions. So the SEDS, as we refer to that, covers Central Vermont, Chittenden County, Addison, and London. We're all together that was kind of the area that was left over. It wasn't, previously. And then we have an enhanced energy plan for state law, where we look at renewable energy sources and natural resources. And just wanted to mention a couple other key documents besides these plans. I mentioned the bylaws already. We also have a Title VI program, so which is a federal requirement for how do we manage people engaging with us? And you'll see like on the bottom of our agendas, there's stuff about ADA and also about Title VI, where we have to provide interpretation services, provide access to people with disabilities. I think that's about them. And then also a public participation plan, which is an MPO requirement, but we've tried to broaden it, as we're gonna do a public participation plan, let's think about how we're engaging on all aspects of our work. Any questions here on kind of these planning documents? And just a little bit more on the public participation plan, we are required to do it, it's kind of, really, we're trying to document how we engage with and learn from our communities. There's a focus on underrepresented communities, those people that don't normally come to public meetings. And really, I think this is fundamental to all of our work, really, is the public engagement. A plan that doesn't have buy-in is. Those are the plans that sit on shelves, right? Like, when you have buy-in, those are things that actually, get momentum and move forward. But kind of dropping down one level from plan to our work program. And there's a link here that will take them to the work program if I want to dig in more detail. We put this together every year. We're on a state fiscal year, July 1 to June 30. And just operationally, we bill every hour. So we really function like a public sector consulting firm. So every hour is billed, and we have hourly rates that we bill, and there's a lot of auditing and reporting to state and federal agencies that we have to comply with. 95% of our revenue comes from, let's say, performance agreements here, but those are grants. Only 5% is from our dues, so we're able to leverage really a lot. And the transportation funds, you'll hear us talk about match, for those that are 80%, the federal transportation funds. V-Trans, we're very thankful for V-Trans because they've contributed 10% of the 20% match. And so they really share that match requirement with the towns, so they do half of it and the towns do the other half.
Some of which the towns do on a per project basis, and then other times we use our fees, use municipal assessment fees to do the match.
Right, yeah, so just as we get deeper into the budget. There's kind of regional functions, so like our staff is paid for by 10% town dues, 10% V-Trans money, or if we're doing a regional transportation study, then that is also 10-10. 10 state, 10 local. If a town wants to do a local transportation study, like, dig into a sidewalk or intersection within the town, then we don't have enough dues to pay for that, so we ask the town to come up with the full 20%. And V-Trans doesn't participate in those local studies.
And usually locally managed projects do the 20% local.
Yeah.
So if you're a town and you decided you want to do a project for your town, but access to 80% federal funds, you can do the whole 20% match yourself and run them. And if you have the staff to do it, you can run the project.
Usually, yeah, we're usually hand-holding right along there because we get audit anxiety.
I don't know why you're letting a lady retire. We're have to have a talk.
Good thing she's not here. Find out she's not allowed. Just in case everybody doesn't know, a lady has told us that she's gonna retire end of June.
Oh, no.
Oh. Right, so it's gonna be okay. Sorry, didn't mean to shock anyone here.
But she has 6 months of engagement.
Yeah, right. She's in Cyprus right now. So she's using a little bit of that, but she'll be back next week. We go through an annual solicitation process around Thanksgiving. We'll send out the application to submit projects. We ask for those to get back in late June. Sorry, January, thank you.
One of those, Jay.
Yes, sorry, I only got to the first letter and just filled my brain filled in the blank. And then there's the UPWP committee, and that's the Unified Planning Work Program. Apologies in advance for acronym city here. But it's really driven by the applications from the municipalities and partners. And sometimes we, are engaging in regional projects. Often the staff come in for those, like right now we're doing, this fiscal year, we have a regional safety action plan that is being worked on. And that, we kind of thought we should do that because the feds set up a program for specific safety funding, but you had to have a safety action plan to qualify for that funding. So usually there's a reason we're doing these plans, and not just to do a plan.
But what kind of safety?
Transportation,
Oh, just okay.
transportation safety, thank you.
All right, like safety from what?
No.
We have those benchmarks we gotta meet, that we
Yes,
improve every year.
yes, those things. Sorry.
And the UPWP committee meets 3 times, January to March. They look at the projects, the applications, and make a recommendation to the board. The committees review April, May. The board, looks at that funding growth in May and our budget and approves it then. Any quick questions on the little program? Probably get more into this when Taylor and Elaine dig deeper into the land use and transportation sides in the next couple months. And just the types of projects, a lot of them have some transportation nexus. We've been, frankly, trying to make as flexible use of the transportation funds as we can. So we've been doing like, transportation related water quality work. We've been doing transportation related land use and zoning work. So, we try to use that money as flexibly as we can. And then we also have been able to support some of the other transportation partners. GMT gets, we provide over, it's about 600,000, maybe a little bit more. It goes to GMT through us for transit planning. Local Motion Capital have been probably around 100,000 a year to each of those organizations. To work on walk bike, and Capital works with employers, reducing employer commuting trips. And then there's a third category, which are projects that are driven by federal or state, typically state agencies. So Vermont Emergency Management has an annual grant program with us for emergency management. Agency of Commerce and Community Development. They're the agency that provides the regional planning grant funds. Department of Health sometimes. Department of Environmental Conservation, that's the water quality money is coming from them. EPA is brownfields, so just to give you a sense of, and we don't, and typically these programs here are typically statewide and they're providing the same scope of work to all the RPCs across the state. Even the transportation, there is a transportation scope of work also that comes out of V-Trans. Sorry, I'm looking at Joe. He remembers that, called the Transportation Planning Initiative. And so there's a scope of work on the transportation planning side that is also consistent across the state with all RPCs.
Charlie, what did I might need to use that, all the money that you guys spend and that you give to your partners has to be for planning only.
That's right.
You can't do projects, and even like with, maybe with CATMA, I share those organizations, they have to probably also use that for planning, or it has to be.
Yeah, planning and education.
Their operations.
That's right. Yeah, it's planning and education, and that's been kind of like. And it's been interesting just in the last week, and I was down in DC, we were talking with USDOT and some other transportation partners that we have, counties and cities, and it was interesting to hear, like, there is no specific list of eligible activities for these transportation planning funds. So it's one of the things that's getting talked about in the reauthorization for the transportation bill in DC over the next year, is like maybe getting more specific or more.
We only know where we can't spend.
Well, and even that is not always 100% clear, except there is this, like, it's gotta be for planning, not construction, not not real engineering.
Well, for that example, maybe, is marketing included in that, in other words, if your GM.
There is space within it for, and I would call that education, but
Okay.
yeah, so there's a public education.
Okay.
And that's a lot of what the locomotion and CAPMA money is kind of going towards that kind of work. And that's where there's kind of a fuzzy line.
Fuzzy lines are good, fuzzy lines are good.
Well, yeah, until you cross one, you go, oh, I didn't know there was a line there. And this is an annual conversation we have with Federal Highway to review our applications to make sure they're not crossing that line with Federal Highway. And yeah, so that's, and then just, once I just go one layer deeper kind of on our budget, like, and the flow of money, there's again a link up there for the budget. A little over 11 million is the estimated revenue budget. Yeah, back to that same 95% grant funded, about 2/3.
So it's not meeting.
Yeah, well, and honestly, this is somewhat of interpreting Jeff's reaction, but pre-COVID, we were in a $4 to $5 million range. So that's,
I never thought we'd get to a point as an organization where we'd be closing in on $1 million a month run rate.
yeah,
It's pretty amazing.
Is it mostly the transportation funding that bumped it up that high, or is it, it couldn't have been ACCP?
no, I mean, that was some of the increase, that money almost doubled.
ACCB's almost 400 grand.
It's almost $1 million now.
Oh, ACCB?
Yeah, and it used to be about 400.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that has doubled in the last 6 years. But then,
But they're asking us to do a lot more.
there's more, yeah, absolutely. There is also, the other big chunks, Joe, to your point, like we did get a raise grant. That was over $1 million,
Right.
you know, in this fiscal year. 2 million of it is broadband. Like, actually $2 million going to, Consolidated Communications to run broadband out in Underhill. Essex, they're trying to get to unserved addresses, with fiber.
That's right, that's right.
I don't know if it's getting in there in Jericho. I was looking at her, I was like, no, I shouldn't say Jericho, because I'm not sure it's getting there. But there's been some other big chunks, Joe, and like we had an urban forestry grant from their Department of Parks, forest, that was like 800,000, so there's been some pretty big chunks. And really, this is the kind of the post Trump won, and also Biden, you know, there was a lot of money that the federal government was pushing out into the system. So we're still digesting that, and it is a big bubble of money that's kind of going through right now.
We had
At some point it'll drop.
well, we had to add somebody in the financial administrative function because we were putting Forrest and Amy on leashes so they wouldn't jump out the window.
Kind of. And our grants typically have term limits, typically 1 to 3 years, and they're typically more than 1 year, they don't typically go past 3. Our operating costs are like 3.8. And about 2/3 of that overall money just passes through, I've already mentioned that kind of a bunch of times, right? Chunks to GMT, but also a lot to consultants on these projects. Yeah, I mentioned the broadband one is going to CCI, right? We're not spending that 2 million ourselves. So most of it passes through. And then this is the tough one. Sorry, Jeff, this bullet point was for you, but we're only spending about 80% of what we budget each year. So always kind of like running a little bit behind, particularly with all our transportation consulting work. There's stuff that we started last year that carries over into this year. There's always a little bit of that happening,
But it's not any worse, even though the whole environment for consultants and doing projects and all that kind of thing has gotten crazy.
yeah.
I mean, something different than this, but the state's capital plan, I mean, they can't spend the money they've authorized to be borrowed because they can't get the people to do it.
Yeah.
And so in the planning, it's not all that much different than in the actual project world. The planning people are so flat out. I mean, thank goodness they like us because they're bidding on our projects if we were a small little, infrequent provide, RFP issue.
You're
or
talking about
planning
consultants.
versus- Yeah, they wouldn't be coming to us, they'd be going to somebody else.
And the consultants, yeah, we typically do like requests for qualifications every few years, and then we have a kind of a stable of consultants that are under contract, and so it has been a pretty stable relationship with those consultants.
And we're
so-
nice to them, we're nice.
most of the time, if they're nice to us. And I really added this bullet here, just so you know, like when we get to near the end of the fiscal years, you'll see like, oh, not all the money is expended. Don't be concerned, that's kind of just part of how things flow. And we're fortunate, like Federal Highway and V-Trans are good in terms of letting the NPO funds in particular roll over the next year. And then last year's funds are the first funds that get spent, right? So, any questions on that real quick? Staff is obviously the biggest expense, after the 66% that passes through. We now have 24 staff plus intern, mostly summer interns. And there is also, I don't want to go down too far down this rabbit hole, but we have what is called, under federal law and guidance, an indirect rate. And this is really particularly because, like, I think, unfortunately, we might have 40 grant agreements that we're operating or working on at any given time. Sometimes
Yes.
it might even be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Then sometimes it's less, but our administrative costs, you do an indirect rate cost proposal that gets reviewed. And ours gets approved by V-Trans, but that's to spread those admin costs across all the resources fairly. Yeah, so if V-Trans is 2/3, they pay 2/3, and ACCD is 20%, they pay 20%. And it's a percentage so that it hits everybody that pays us.
Our newer members will hear about this a lot. Because it's one of the things that we have to estimate, and then at the end of the year, we reconcile it to what we estimated. And it's very hard sometimes to come within, just a few tenths of a percentage point of what we estimated at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So we get whipsawed in our results with under and overestimating on the indirect rate. But the nice thing is that over multiple years, it pretty much evens out.
Right.
Even if in an individual year, we don't do, we have an issue with either a overage or an underage, and when we over collect, we gotta take it out of the next year, and when we under collect, we make it up the next year. And then that causes all sorts of interesting things, which is why, as an organization, we're working really hard to develop 3 months worth of our expenditure outlays for our direct expenses, not the pass-throughs
In reserve.
so that we can absorb these things that happen year to year, which we're just captive by a federal process that we work with V-Trans to go through.
And we've been kind of getting better at the swings that we've used, although we recently had some change, so we'll see, we may have started a new swing, I don't know, hopefully not. And that gets reviewed and confirmed in annual audits, so there is an annual audit that happens, every fall. And that will come to the board, probably at your November meeting. See if it's actually ready to be approved by the board. We've sometimes had an issue where we need to defer to the executive committee to accept the audit because it's not quite ready at the board meeting date, but anyway, just a heads up, you see that in the next couple.
And that's another issue. We now work with a company that's out of state, when we used to have somebody in Montpelier that did it, but not everybody's doing federal audits anymore.
So honestly, we had to beg and cry a little bit to find one auditor, so.
But at the same time, there's less auditors for municipalities.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, there's just not as many of them out there, so.
So you bill it, is it a different indirect rate you bill ACCD and?
No,
it's the same one,
It's the same rate.
and that's where the channel fees from.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, it tries to, treat everybody equally, so, if everybody gets charged, whatever, X%, it's the same X%.
It was easier when only NPO had to do it. For the transportation funding, it was a lot easier.
yeah, we didn't do it as a percentage, then it was kind of actual recovery at that point. And the last, or this major section, like, so we do all that planning, we have a work program, we're working on those plans. You know, what happens after we do our work? Some things get implemented through state legislation, others through municipal legislation, municipal zoning, municipal bylaws. Projects get invested in, you know, the transportation capital program at the state, but municipal capital programs also, right? Or even just your road budget. And then other things are implemented with grant programs. You know, whether you get a grant or a loan from the state or the bond bank to build a water system or expand your wastewater system. And then there's others that are just programming, things like the designation program does tax credits and grants in the village centers and downtowns. Yeah, the emergency relief and assistance fund is something that the state has put together to try to support towns in matching FEMA dollars for projects. So is that helpful at all?
And all those things are changing, also designations are changing.
Well, yes, lots of stuff is changing. And then, so how are we set up to kind of carry all these things out? Hopefully you're a little familiar with this already. Yeah, we have all the municipalities have membership on the board. Each legislative body, your select board or city council appoints a rep. Thank you for volunteering or being voluntold, however it worked in your town. And then there's another category of members on our board that are what our bylaw is called regional representatives, but it's kind of sector representatives. There's a seat for agriculture. Bruce fills the socio-economic housing seat. Industrial business is
Something.
yeah, typically GBIC and the chamber kind of work together to give us an appointee for our board. And then we have a conservation environment seat, that's Miles Waite has been pretty active on our board. And then there's VTrans has a voting seat on transportation issues. The rest of these transportation organizations have the non-voting seats. So Federal Highway, the airport, FTA, GMT, and there's a seat for the railroad industry too that kind of fluctuates between
Whether or not Rick wants to show.
well, it's Vermont Rail, or I don't even know what the current name is, Genesee, Wyoming, they may have a different name right now. Yeah, we have two rail systems that serve Chicken County. And they kind of alternate that seat. Any questions on the membership piece?
Yeah, what do the non-voting seats do?
Information.
Typically,
Advice.
in the real world, not a lot. But they do have a seat in case they want to provide input on something. I mean, Federal Highway, in some ways, like when we're working on our work program and reviewing applications, they have a pretty heavy hand, as Joe's kind of mentioned, like what qualifies for using those federal funds or not. So that's where they weigh in, but it's not necessarily at the board table, it's kind of before things get to the board.
And you will see on the agenda that if there's gonna be a vote, if it's for transportation purposes, and it's for MPO, the Public Planning Organization, you'll see MPO business, and that says who can vote. Because sorry.
No, that's a sign.
We try to make it clear whether it's MPO business or CCRPC.
Yep. And the MPO business, you know, is and this is where kind of when we merged, it got a little funky. And so we'll have both the MPO voting members and the RPC voting members vote separately, like on our work program. And the same thing happens when we adopt our plan. The regional plan, and there's kind of an MPO vote, so it allows VTrans to vote, and then an RPC vote. Yeah, so those non-voting orgs are on the left here. So in addition to the towns that I mentioned, aside from the Gore, sorry, Garrett,
It's not a town.
yeah, They vote on MPO business only, V-Trans votes there. And we also have weighted voting, this is referenced up here, when it gets to MPO, so Burlington has 4 votes, Colchester. And South Burlington, sorry, we left off South Burlington, sorry, South Burlington, you get 2 votes also.
We'll take theirs.
Yeah.
And Essex doesn't get 2 votes now.
Yeah, well, Essex is now 2 separate towns.
Yeah, so what's happened with that?
So the city has a vote, and we've kind of operated like that.
Yeah, the town outside the village, when it was a village, had 1 vote.
Yeah.
So now it's the town outside the city. And the city has a vote, like the village had a vote.
Yeah, and then everybody else gets 1 vote. And then there are some RPC business only things where those sector reps can vote. I probably should add something to this. The other unique voting situation is when we approve a town plan, and only the municipalities can vote on that. Questions on?
Did you maybe just talk about why they get 4 votes or how they get to that?
It's based on population, just because of their Burlington, no? Yeah, and I wasn't here for the, formation of that, but there was just discussion of like fair representation, and so there's weighted voting there. And I don't know that it's ever really been a factor, maybe at some point back in
the early
certain
In the
days.
early days, there was a lot of concern about the core communities, Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Essex. And the non-core or rural communities, because there was some history at one point in time before the NPO became all the municipalities. That there was a concentration on funding and project voting in the core communities. And there was always concern about the what we call it, the rural communities, and this was before I came on, just before I came on. The board back in 2001, there was quite a division. And it was part of the reason, I think, why the regional planning, it was personality issue, but why the regional planning commission and the NPO were separate on that front. So
It should also be noted that only 20% of the MPOs nationwide have weighted voting. 80% are one municipality, one.
Yeah, the other thing that's kind of unique here that we did in the late 90s, I think, Joe, pipe in, you probably have more direct knowledge than anybody about what was going on then, but the other unique thing is that this MPO decided to expand their boundaries to incorporate those rural towns. That is pretty unusual around the country. Most of them are just the urban area.
Yeah, and there used to be, before that happened, there used to be the rural planning organization.
That's right.
So they're under the regional planning commission, there were these 3, there was the regional planning commission, the NPO, and the rural planning organization. And sometimes there was cross pollination, but they could be doing completely different things.
Yeah.
And RPO was kind of like other RPCs, they didn't really have much weight.
Yeah.
Or much money to spend. It seemed to me anyway, like it was great when they all came together, just.
Yeah. I think it really has made a big difference, and being able to spend those urban dollars in our rural towns has, I think, been a huge boon to the rural towns.
I was at the state planning office when the MPO was over.
Anything else on voting? Yeah, thanks. And then part of also when we came together as one organization, we spent a bunch of time thinking about which committees, because there was also a sense of like the board isn't going to be able to dig in as much detail at the board level. We're going to need to be more dependent on the committees to review things and make recommendations up to the board. Let me just move to the org chart maybe. And we gotta have the public and local and state governments, both at the top and the bottom, depending on which way you want to think about things. But the board of directors here oversees these, I don't even know how many committees, 9 committees now. And the green ones are kind of the land use and planning, long range planning, planning advisory committee. This one focuses more on the regional plan. Planning Advisory Committee focuses more on town plan reviews, and just kind of coordinating with kind of the professional staff that we're fortunate that almost all of our towns have professional planning staff. And then we have a Clean Water Advisory Committee. And this is Taylor and his staff here who work for those committees. Here's the Transportation Advisory Committee and Elaine here and transportation staff, all working on things that committee reviews. The Executive Committee, which also really serves as our Personnel Committee. And so.
And finance.
Yeah, and finance is still kind of separate, like there's one more board member that's added to the executive committee for finance committee purposes. And then we have community engagement, a board development committee, which is think nominating committee mostly, although they also.
They're responsible for this training.
That's right, they also provide
In the bylaws.
direction, that's right, the bylaws. And then the work program committee I mentioned earlier. The Community Engagement Advisory Committee is the newest committee that we just started that up a couple of years ago. To really do more to hear from those underrepresented communities that don't normally come for meetings. And you'll see some stuff from, they were the Equity Advisory Committee, we did do a little rebranding early this year for some reason, I can't remember. That's a joke. Kind of. Yeah, and this is Forrest, is the business director, and his staff, are obviously working on the finances and making sure we're staying compliant there. And Nelson, Emma, and Melanie also kind of report directly to me as kind of the three, somewhat overhead functions, but kind of overarching functions.
Can I interrupt for a moment?
Sure.
Just ask you to emphasize a bit more of the acronym word or test of Jonathan, for instance, but if you look at the third from the left, the CWAC, it's often referred to as the quack, which in the easy way to remember the water one. And then of course the C, which Charlie pronounces as the CEAC, which is on the right-hand side, the Community Engagement Advisory Committee. I'm often confused when I hear C and quack, and I try to,
And there's a test for all new members in first 6 months.
And then the two rather standing committees would be the TAC, the TAC, which is often made up of DPW directors from various municipalities and towns, and the PAC, which is the planning directors of various municipalities and towns, taking the heavy lifting for the transportation and the planning right down in the feelings and gathering that feedback from them. So those I think are important just to point out. The long range planning committee was one I started with when I was new. If you're looking for a board to get on board with, the past chair is generally the board development committee, and then the UPWP is operated by the vice chair. Thank you, Jane.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's Jen.
Where's the WP? I mean, not the UPWP, the MS4 meetings, where are they?
that's under the Clean Water.
Clean water.
Yeah, there's a. Just referring to, I always get the S's wrong, but.
It is still a separate storm sewer system, kind of.
Yeah, so there's a clean water requirement for our urban towns, and they're referred to as MS4 communities. So there's a subcommittee of the QUAC that is just those MS4 towns. Sorry.
So funny, I'm on the quack and I'm on the advisory. And when I first get quack, I'm like, what? When I first started, I'm like, on the advisory.
Thank God, thank God.
All right, and just kind of to conclude here, there's actually one last thing. If you wanna kind of get to know the staff or anything in more detail, there's a staff page where you can kind of see all our faces and get a sense of what we are individually working on typically. And then just the website, we try to put as much content as we can up on the website. Thank you, Emma. But if you're looking for any agendas or meetings or Title VI or staff or the plans or current projects in your towns, there's each town has a page, so you can see, current projects that are happening. Also, this is the time of year that I'm going around to each select board and city council, so the annual report for your town is right there if you wanna pull that out for some reason. But
And they're quite good. And
The
then, I
reports?
think, yeah, I think they're quite good, talks about all the planning activity and everything that happened in each community, so. As members and liaisons between the RPC and your legislative bodies, it's always good to be familiar with. What we are doing, and more importantly, when Charlie goes, that he doesn't go alone.
yeah, and you know, and I will invite you when I get scheduled on your select board or city council meeting, I will, you know, make sure to invite you, make sure you have a copy of the report. And you know, whether you can make it or plug in, sorry, we'll get a test because we were just at the town of Bolton Monday night, but it was great that you were able to plug in.
Yeah, I wanted to make it in person, I just like couldn't quite.
Yeah, no problem.
But
And that is all I got.
You
And
left out Wicks and Cliffs.
yeah,
That's fine, there's.
yeah, that's actually, there's kind of a side function that we're doing for DEC on clean water with basin water quality councils. And as a clean water service provider, so, yeah, that is kind of a side function that we're doing, which is there somewhere, yeah,
I
so.
feel like when nobody's got anywhere to put anything, they put it to us. That's
Yeah,
what it
we are,
feels like.
we're getting loved to death a bit in the legislature. I'm gonna stop sharing and we've got a couple minutes before the board meeting.